Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thrive, Not Just Survive. I'm your host, Nasira Jamal, and I am so glad that I've actually had messages because we missed last week, Friday, with this talk with Dr. Bryant-Bruce. I was actually had a few messages coming in saying they missed that conversation. So I'm really glad to have her back. And today we want to talk about, sort of continue our conversation on Black Lives Matter, social justice, equality for all. And with the presidential race that's going on in the United States, different things are sort of coming to the forefront in terms of what needs our attention, or a discussion at least, so that we're aware of where these things could be stemming from, and our own perspective as a reflection of what we feel about them. Because we want to make sure that, like we've always talked about, do we want to be part of the solution, or are we part of the problem? And this is where I think this conversation really comes together when Dr. Bryant-Bruce and I really hash it out, talk it out, and kind of put it out there so that you all as the audience can look at it and reflect on it, and also come up with your own perspective of where you stand on it. So let's get this conversation started with Dr. Bryant-Bruce. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here today.
Hey, Nasira. Again, always good to be here. It's always a fun conversation.
It is. And I really appreciate, sort of, you always do like some reading, some kind of research before we get here so that we're prepared,
Yes,
and that you can really enlighten the audience in terms of not just current affairs, because obviously that's the topic of the day, but really
right.
behind it, where is it coming from? What is the stemming foundation? Because that's where we're kind of feeling these things are rising, right? Because we've not really
Yeah.
addressed them. So let's talk about what's going on right now with the new presidential race that's out there, and how it's being affected on the people.
Okay. So, I mean, we're talking about Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter affects Blacks, affects everyone worldwide in many, many different ways. There are many, many facets. And one of the facets that we have to look at, when we think about Black Lives Matter, everybody thinks about people being shot in the street. No, it's much, much greater than that. It is racism that is played out on a daily basis in lots of different ways. And one of the ways that it gets played out, one of the places where Blacks are targeted, and of course, we're talking largely in these conversations right now about African Americans, but I have to remind you that racism is a worldwide problem. And it's been a while, but it wasn't that long back that we were having these same sorts of battles to end apartheid. So this is not a, a focal problem of the United States. This is a worldwide problem. And one of the places that it shows up most prominently is when we get into the discussion of Black women. And I'm even going to expand that. I'm going to focus on Black women, but as I say Black women, I want you to still wrap your head around that this is not just Black women, this is women of color, because it kind of crosses the board universally. And I see it time again, whether it's American Indian women or East Indian women or Mexican women, Asian women, it crosses the board. It's women of color that are targeted by the masses, and the masses largely comprised of white men, but white women play into the stereotyping because it is of benefit to them. We talk about systemic racism. Let's talk about systemic privilege for white women. Um, the thing is that, particularly as Black women start to rise in stature, in esteem, in economic empowerment, in positions of power, then we see this phenomena rear its head vehemently. And what it is that these Black women who raise their heads to say, I am strong, I am powerful, I have something to contribute to society, to the world at large, the pushback that comes is a denigration of these women by focusing on their sexuality. There's a misogyny that occurs. And again, this misogyny is not just coming from white men, it is also coming from white women. And it stems out of something that was basically a Jezebel phenomena. There's actually a term that I can't recall just at this second that is applied to this. And there is a website that Nasira will be showing you, the ferris.edu, Jim Crow Jezebel. I'd like for all of you to go and read that. It's highly informative and really very, very interesting. But one of the things that it talks about is, and I can't remember the term, I think it's Carthage or something of that nature. It starts with a C. But part of this is based out of that because during the times of slavery, um, some Black women played into the overall misogynistic uh, mindset of white men. And the premise was this, that the white woman was pure. She was innocent. She was everything virtuous. Black women, by definition, were the opposite of that. Black women were Jezebel. Black women were promiscuous. Black women were sexualizing themselves. They were sexualized in the minds of white men and white women. Um, White men were in power at that time, so they had control over Black women. And a lot of Black women were raped. A lot of African Americans are conceived out of rape in their ancestry. And so the majority of African Americans have mixed heritage. And I actually want to stop on that point because one of the arguments that's being had in the presidential race with Kamala Harris, and I want to emphasize her name is Kamala, because that is a point that she has brought up. My name is not Kamala, my name is not Carmela, none of that. Her name is Kamala, and we should respect her by calling her by her correct name. So one of the things that has been an issue in her run for vice president has been her racial identity. She is of mixed race. Her mother is East Indian. Her father is Jamaican, and he was mixed black and white. And so, and there's Asian in her heritage. So she claims all of her heritage. She claims her East Indian heritage. She claims her Asian heritage. She claims her Black heritage. And she claims her white heritage. And she has a right to do that. And the argument has been that, she's not Black enough to be called a Black candidate. Well, she identifies herself as Black. That's her primary identification. And when she walks in a room, that's what people see and identify her as. But she equally claims all parts of her. And I say that in that a lot of people, and including Blacks, are pushing back against that. And my answer to that is we all have a right to claim all of our heritage. I am American Indian. I am West Indian. I am Black, descended from African heritage. And I have white in my background. I claim them all. I'm of mixed heritage, but I identify as a Black woman. So I just wanted to make that point of clarification with Kamala. And so we have Kamala here. She's running for president. What she's going through, we're seeing with Senator Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and we saw it even before her with First Lady Michelle Obama. And we've seen it with other women who have risen outside of the political arena. And the name that comes to mind immediately is or are Serena and Venus Williams. These women came to the forefront, and immediately they talked about how these women look. Serena and Venus, they said, were too masculine looking. They were too dark. They were too a lot of things other than beautiful Black women who were highly talented and very intelligent with good business sense. Those were not the things that were focused on, even when they were playing in the sports arena, as opposed to focusing so frequently on powerful serves and such. Those were addressed as far as was necessary in the game, but then they would go to the attire of the women. With Representative AOC, they frequently call her outside of her name, words that we're not going to go into on this show, but that are definitely denigrating women as a whole and denigrating her as a woman. And one of the labels that we can address on the show that is commonly given to women, whether it's Kamala or it's First Lady Obama or it's Alexandria or Venus or Serena or whoever the woman may be, women who are powerful and who are seeking to advance their careers are perceived of as aggressive. So, and this is not framed in a good context. I'm generally there's a B word that's associated with that aggressiveness. And so, this is, men don't have to deal with this. When you put it in the frame of African American or Black women, then it becomes not only aggressive, but it becomes the angry Black woman phenomenon. And, we've all heard that term thrown around. When Michelle Obama first came on the scene, she was perceived of as the angry Black woman. And Michelle has done a lot to soften her image, to create a look that will be acceptable to all. There was nothing wrong with her original look, but she had to redefine it to fit what was going to be acceptable as defined basically by a white male population. And one of the things that came up very early in the presidential candidacy of President Obama was, now this is a woman who is married to her husband, has been for many years. Every single one of her children was born in wedlock, and she's about to become the First Lady of the United States. And instead of giving her the respect as a woman, they started calling her Obama's baby's mama. Now, obviously, that's denigrating. That is pejorative and it's unacceptable. And then we see with Kamala Harris is a very nice looking woman. And things are said about her being easy on the eye. And they talk about her attire, sexualizing her attire. Now, the woman is a very attractive woman. She's presenting very professionally in very nice looking pantsuits, nice looking skirt sets. the fact that she's a nice looking woman with a nice looking figure should not be her definition. She's coming hard. She's very intelligent. She has degrees out the yin yang. She's had positions. I mean, the woman is just on point. Whether you like her or not is not the issue. The woman is coming with strong credentials. That is what needs to be.
So I want to just talk about that. I mean, obviously, this is something that is like for women, and I don't want to say that this isn't actually a Black woman of color issue, but generally overall, women have been categorized, almost sexualized, generally, right? Like
Generally.
a beautiful woman walks in a room, there's a different air, in terms of how people are viewing her, rather than like what her credentials are or anything that's deeper than just the physical appearance, right?
Yeah.
And then we actually get it where now it's women in power, or making this kind of leap towards a position that typically isn't, I don't know, denoted for a woman of color,
right.
Black woman,
Yes.
and we lose that sort of intensity of, well, what's her credentials? What does she bring to the table? Is she going to move us forward? Is she actually going to be the one talking for the people? Is she going to look at the issues at hand and bring a different perspective? And I think this is where we have to really continue the conversation in all areas of women being intelligent and having those credentials, right? So I appreciate that you brought this forward, because of course this is the part of the news right now. This is why we're even talking about First Lady Michelle Obama, Kamala. These are things in the media, but it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that, right? For women generally, we want to be noted for who we are, not necessarily what we look like.
Yes.
Right. And I think that is the key conversation. And I think that, as we bring it to the forefront, this has been going on for thousands of years, is to be able to talk about it candidly like this and say, this is not right. This is right. We need to address it from a different perspective. Look at the woman in a different way.
Yes. And one of the things that I would like to bring to your attention is that historically, women have in part played into this, but I'd like to define the why on that. And again, I refer you back to the Ferris.edu site on the Jezebel article. And part of that, again, especially in the history of African Americans, comes out of the intelligence of women. Because one of the things that was recognized quite early was that two things could occur. A, if you were lighter skinned, you could fare better and be treated better. And women very quickly recognized that white men were coming into the compounds of Black women and taking them out and raping them, basically. It was very sexual. And so women started to think about this and said, well, if we offer ourselves to Mr. and we give Mr. favor, then Mr. may start to treat us better. And so these women would offer their services and they would wait on these men hand and foot and provide them with services that often their wives were not willing to. And in exchange, Mr. would put them up in a nicer house or let them become, quote, a house nigger. And so they could work in the house instead of the field. When they had a child with Mr., the child was going to be lighter. So again, it was going to have favor even outside of the realm of Mr. Now it's more acceptable to whites all around. But because this child is a child of Mr., it's going to get more favor. So these women had a plan. They had a thought as to why they were using their bodies. They understood their bodies were already going to be taken, whether they were agreeable or not. But they saw that, okay, if my body is going to be used, then let me determine how it's going to be used and what I'm going to get out of that. And that is, it's a smart way of thinking. It's a woman, it's entrepreneurial. It's a woman using her brain to advance her position. So there is a female component of that. We have, to a certain extent, played into that. And I mean, even in history before slavery and Black history, throughout the ages, we've seen this played out in women who have had to use their body, not because they were Jezebels per se, but because there was advantage in them using their body. It may have allowed them to put food on their table for their family, and women will do what women need to do to take care of their families. And I think that that needs to be recognized, because I think that that's an honorable thing. Now, when a woman is not using her body in this way, when she is using her brain, her wit, her talent, and all, one has to acknowledge her brain, her wit, her talent. She is not sexualizing herself, and she should not be sexualized. When she steps out onto a platform to speak, she should not be considered a piece of meat. Instead of listening to the words that are coming out of her mouth, you're sitting there looking at what she's wearing, and, oh, that's a bit too tight, and she may want some. Maybe I'll try and meet up with her afterwards and see if I can meet her, get to talk to her, see if I can get a photo op with her to show to all of my boys back home, this kind of thing. And then on the other side, you have white women who are hating on her because they see the response of the white male toward her. And in a way, it is threatening to them. And in a way, it's denigrating them as well. And they feel a loss of power because this woman has come on the scene that is taking the focus from them from a sensual, sexual standpoint. And so they'll look at her and they'll be like, she's not all that. So as opposed to listening again to what she's saying, they're busy defending their own womanhood in their head.
And I think, we have to sort of talk about this as, your one's own insecurities, where that's stemming from. And for a male, perhaps looking at a woman that is so smart, so accomplished, so, maybe even beyond their own level of intelligence, of what they're bringing to the table, of feeling that inferiority, just because it's a gender difference, not because, we're saying, well, let's just see who's smarter, right, in this particular topic, or who's showing up for this particular position. It's because their own insecurities are coming to the forefront. And the only way to attack is, sort of taking that low punch, right, is let's attack with that, because you can't attack with intelligence, because somebody up there is already beating you on that.
Yes.
So this is where we become almost like, children, in a playground, because you have nothing but a different level of
power. You're insulting the children. Don't insult the children. Children behave better than adults.
You're absolutely right. They behave better. But what I mean is that, you're almost like in a playground trying to, fight for that swing, right? And it's like, come on, like, we should have come further. This is 2020, right? And if we all want to move forward, then we have to look at our people that are in power, the people that are making these big decisions, and we have to look at them differently, right? Because if we come from this place of insecurity or inferiority, then our own decisions are going to be not from that place of power.
Yes.
That's it. It's period, right? So, and I think, obviously this conversation is way bigger, and we need to continue it. I want to, of course, respect the time in terms of our, audience. And so,
Yes.
I mean, we're getting to that 30 minutes, but I honor you for bringing this to the table, because I feel for women, I mean, in general, but especially women of color, this is an important conversation, because Kamala is bringing something to the table now, to the light of people,
Yes.
that is, that is going to ruffle feathers, that is going to trigger people in different ways, right? Because she's going to challenge people from her
She
intellect, from
she
her
is.
and
And
her position.
yes, and one of the things that you said earlier is that a lot of people are going to approach her from a position of insecurity, and males, white males in particular, because in the current structure, the white male is supposed to be the head. He's supposed to be the most intelligent, the most powerful, the most everything positive that there is. And you have this beautiful, powerful, intelligent, talented Black woman stepping onto the platform to take one of the most powerful positions in both the United States and in the world, really, when you think about it. And so for a lot of men, she has stepped to places that they will never achieve. And their insecurity is causing them to be very angry with her. And they need to examine the sources of that anger, because it has nothing to do with Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
It's their own insecurity. It's their internal issues. So when we are triggered to feel angry, to feel jealous, if we actually give it the proper name, when we're triggered to feel this way, we need to not focus externally, but to focus internally, to figure out why we are feeling that way and what we need to do about it, to unruffle our own feathers, to give ourselves a sense of security so that we don't have to be angry with Kamala Harris or with First Lady Obama or with AOC. We don't have to be angry with them, because we are in such a position of security, of self-confidence, that we can applaud their accomplishments because we are satisfied with our own.
Yeah. And I think that what you just said goes across just life in general, not just looking at this, although this is really important to be looking at, but we must find that place within to feel that level of confidence within ourselves, with our own journeys, and not to take from others while, that is a different journey. And I think this whole idea of self-reflection and the inner work that's required for all of us to find our place is a big one. And as COVID-19 has, I think, brought about the opportunity to take that journey inward, to enlighten ourselves with our own powers, because we all have it. And that, it's not a competition between you and I, or you and or me and Kamala. It is really a competition that I have with me being the best version of me.
Absolutely.
And so I want to end that today with that profound thinking that everybody should take that journey inward and bring
Absolutely.
that for themselves, because then you show up differently, and what you see then outside is something that's empowering.
Yes. Yes.
And I want to thank you today for bringing that. It's so eloquently, as we talk about this topic, because it can ruffle feathers and it can kind of bring about feelings of unrest even within ourselves, that it's a great conversation to continue perhaps even next week when we come back, because I think it is a longer conversation than just the 30 minutes that we have today. So I want to thank you for your time, Cheryl. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I will see you next week.
All right. Stay safe out there.
Thank you. Okay, so you saw how, we took this conversation that is really, it's a very huge conversation, right? And as women, as a woman, I feel like as entrepreneurs, as women, as we come together, we support each other, but sometimes there is that feeling of somebody doing something more, or somebody doing it better, or somebody, there's that competition that rises. And I really want to challenge all of us to look within when we get triggered with that, to see why is it that it's bringing about that level of insecurity in within us. Because really everything that we really want or need or care about lies within. And we talk about this in my other, conversations where the journey begins within, and how we want to be and show up for ourselves, our families, our communities, and our tribes is going to begin with that knowledge. So for today, I encourage you to take that for the next few days. Think about it, reflect on it, journal on it, see what you come up with. And I'd love to hear more from you guys in the coming weeks as we continue this conversation. So with that, I want to wish you a wonderful Friday, a happy, prosperous weekend. And remember to always be kind to yourself and to others. I will see you next week.